I don't usually write out my whole sermon, but I did this time. I have a tendency, especially about subjects I know something about, to wander or to tell too many stories and things like that. But I wanted to start off with kind of a disclaimer. When an issue is brought up, especially by an elder, it's often assumed that there's something going on behind the scenes and to prompt that concern. But I wanted to let you know that that's not the case in this. Daniel asked me to speak this Sunday night, and because of the work I do as a counselor, I thought this would be a helpful subject to look at from a biblical point of view. We do not need to be ignorant of the evil that goes on in this world, and we have responsibilities also to those who suffer from the evil in this world. Each Sunday night, at the end of the worship service, one of the elders prays for those who are struggling with grief and with illness and with disease, people who are having operations, and end-of-life issues. And this is as it should be, and I appreciate that in this congregation. You know, we are to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice, and because of that, we also celebrate those who come to put Christ on in baptism. We celebrate those who marry, those who have children, those that graduate, those that have anniversaries. This congregation is so good at honoring its teachers and encouraging one another. We compliment those who lead in worship. The members here show appreciation to the elders and deacons for their work. This is one of the most loving churches that I've ever attended, and every member is precious, and the concerns that they have are things that we as elders are concerned about. My lesson tonight is about a subject that is rarely spoken of, discussed in churches, not just in this church, but in all churches. There are some here who know this subject too well, know it better than I do. It's been a constant in their lives for perhaps months or years or decades, and they don't talk about it. And because it's not talked about by other people, they feel shame. They feel shame because of what happened to them, even though they did nothing wrong. And it's one of the worst things, I think, that can happen to a person. I see it as worse than murder, because when a person's murdered, their life is over. But for the person who suffers this, they aren't finished with suffering. They oftentimes suffer throughout their life. They live lives of torture and shame and suffering. And the thing is that certain things trigger them, things that you wouldn't think would trigger a person. It can be like a certain fragrance, a certain cologne smell, a certain kind of touch, people of a certain stature or body type trigger them. And I'm talking about sexual abuse, a sensitive subject, but one that should not be ignored. And it should be something that we realize that people in our congregation, and it's not like I know who that is, but just from statistics, there are people who are struggling with that. There are many kinds of abuse that people endure: physical, mental, spiritual abuse, and sexual abuse oftentimes contains all of these along with it. As the subject is called, abuse of the soul, and I'm speaking of the impact that this has on a person's soul, and we're all about souls here. Let me begin with a story that happened back in the 90s. I was speaking at the ACU lectures on the subject of sexual abuse, and I spoke for 3 hours, scattered out. We'd have an hour, and then there would be a break, then another hour, and then an hour in the afternoon. And there were about 70 who were in attendance. They were mainly elders, preachers, their wives. A few ACU students were also there. And I was talking to them about the research, and I think I gave the percentage that probably or likely 25% of their congregations suffered from abuse. And that's kind of shocked them, the idea, that 1 in 4 people. I think now I would probably give a more conservative estimate on that it's probably about 20%. But whether it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, that's a lot in churches. But we don't hear about it. And I think the people, just from looking at them, they found this hard to believe. And it wasn't just the people who had been abused who found it hard to believe, but certainly the people, who had not been abused believed it. So I had prepared some little squares of yellow paper, I remember, and I said, I want you to put on this a Y if you were sexually abused. Now remember the population. This was elders, preachers, elders' wives, preachers' wives, and students from ACU. So put a Y on there if you were abused. Put an N if you weren't, and put a question mark if you maybe suspect it, but you don't know if you did. And I said, and when you come back at the next lecture, I'll give you what the breakdown was. And so I think just about everybody came back because they were curious about that. And when it all came down, 31%, 31.4% to be exact, of that group said that they had been sexually abused. And when you added in the question marks, it was 34%. So you wouldn't have expected that. But why would the people who had been abused be surprised at that? Because no one talks about it. Other people, I had here's a story that I didn't intend to say, but it's a short one. A lady who was coming from a town north of here, and with 3 of her friends, and she got talking about how she had suffered sexual abuse as a child, and she said, out of those 4 people that she was talking with, 3 out of the 4 had also been abused. So it is much more common than we'd think. And sexual abuse, just to give you a definition, is any sexual act that is committed or attempted without the freely given consent of the victim. This includes actions that occur against someone who is unable to consent or refuse, such as coercion or threats. It can involve physical intrusion or any sexual activity with individuals under the age of 18, regardless of whether they gave consent. The soul, or the mind, is who we are, and it is impacted by this. The part that lives on after we are gone from this earth. It is the part that interfaces with our brain and our body, and it is also the part that interfaces with our spirit and God. And that's how I look at what the soul is. Even people who are suffering from dementia, there are times we see when they have these moments of lucidity, and it's like the person is all the way back. And so like somehow it breaks through the brain and into the person's consciousness. The Bible talks about this, and in Leviticus 18, it speaks of a variety of things that the Bible considers incest, some of the things that we wouldn't even put in as incest today. And it condemns it. And these are described as abominations that defile the land to the point that the land will spew the perpetrators out from it. These were the practices of the Canaanites who had lived in that land and were judged. And God said that he would judge those who did such things. In the New Testament, Matthew chapter 5, verses 31 through 32, it says, it was said, Jesus says this, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say that everyone who divorces his wife except for the reasons of unchastity makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. That word unchastity is the word porneia, and it means adultery, it means incest, it means any kind of sexual immorality. So we know that this is wrong, and let's look at two stories from the Bible about sexual abuse and how people loved by God ignored the victims. And the first one is Genesis 34. If you have your Bibles, turn to that. And the background for this is Jacob, and we know the story. Jacob left home, fleeing from his brother, had a vision at Bethel, a ladder, a staircase that was, reached up to heaven, and angels were ascending and descending. And the Lord promised that he would be with Jacob. And Jacob vowed with a lot of, ifs. If God would protect him, if he'd feed him and clothe him, the Lord would be his God, and he would give a tenth to him. But when he returned to Canaan, he didn't go back to Bethel. He stopped about 20 miles short of Bethel in a town near Shechem, at the foot of Mount Gerizim. If you went to Israel today, Jacob's well is still there. And so God was not his God, and no tenth was required at that place. But when he settled near Shechem, he bought the land, and he did build an altar, naming it God, the God of Israel, and he was Israel. So that was, he was keeping part of his promise. But the idea of giving a tenth, he stayed short of that. So let me read kind of a longer passage, but chapter 34, verses 1 through 18. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he took her and lay with her by force. And he was deeply attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for a wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter, but his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob kept silent until they came in. Then Hamor, the son of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. Now the sons of Jacob came in from the fields, and when they heard it, and the men were grieved, and they were very angry, because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughters. Please give her to him in marriage, and intermarry with us. Give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves. Thus you shall live with us, and the land shall be open before you. Live and trade in it, and acquire property in it." Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "If I find favor in your sight, then I will give whatever you say to me. Ask me ever so much bridal payment and gift, and I will give according to you what you say to me. But give me the girl in marriage." But Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor with deceit, and spoke to them because he had defiled their sister. And they said to them, "We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we consent to you. If you will become like us, and every male of you be circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters for ourselves, and we will live with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughters and go." Now their words seemed reasonable to Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. Now, by the description, Dinah was an adolescent. She was the daughter of Jacob and Leah, and Jacob, as we know, did not value the children of Leah as he did Rachel's. And when he heard it, he did nothing. He's not the one who even negotiated with Hamor and Shechem. And so Levi and Simeon took justice into their hand. They waited until the third day after the men had been circumcised, went in and wiped everyone out, and took what they wanted from the city. When Levi and Simeon did this, they were criticized by their father. In verse 30, it says, "And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, 'You have brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and my men, being few in number, they will gather together against me and attack me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my household.'" And then Levi and Simeon reminded him of something. But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a harlot?" And so, if you want to nominate, someone as one of the worst fathers in the Bible, Jacob would be one of them. And the next one would be David, who we're going to talk about in just a minute. Jacob did not help his daughter. He did not stand up for his daughter. Levi and Simeon did. After this, Jacob did go to Bethel, and he did fulfill his promise. But none of this would have happened if he had just obeyed or kept his promise to God. So there's no indication that Dinah ever married or anything else happened, that she had any children or anything like that. But Jacob did not forget and forgive the actions of his sons. He was willing to not do anything about Shechem and Hamor, but he cursed his two sons in Genesis 49, verses 5 through 7. They would not have land. And Levi, had cities, his descendants. Simeon got absorbed into the tribe of Judah with some scattered property here and there. Judaism and Christianity defend those who are abused. Sexual abuse was a capital crime under the law of Moses. But there are cultures that say that it's okay, that women are not worth much to them. Children can be mistreated sexually if the people so desire. The Russians during World War II and in Ukraine today mistreat women and adolescents and even other soldiers who are Russians. There are other religions outside of Christianity and Judaism that treat women and girls as objects. In our country, there's human trafficking. So even in a Christian country, where there's a lot of Christians, there's people who don't go by that. People suffer greatly. Boys and men are sexually abused too and are trafficked. All of this is wicked and evil of the most sort. It's so ugly that people don't want to even think that it happens. And that's why we don't talk about it. They don't want to believe that a world is that bad and that there might be things like this going on around them. So they pretend it isn't. And those who have experienced the torture just have to bury it. And or they have to find a therapist, a paid friend. And that's really sad. Never should this be covered up. And never should the victim be blamed. Victims oftentimes hear things like, "You shouldn't have been there," or "You shouldn't have been wearing that," or "I told you not to go out with that guy," or "I told you not to hang out with those people." A victim of a crime does not need a lecture, but comfort. They need to believe and not silence. The second scripture that I'd like for us to look at is 2 Samuel 13. And this has to do with a woman named Tamar. David's first son was Amnon. His mother was Ahinoam of Jezreel. She had been married to King Saul. David's first wife, Michal, the daughter of Saul, was barren, so she never had any children. So Amnon was his first. Amnon, in most circumstances, would have been the next king, but God had chosen Solomon to be the next king. David had cursed himself when he told Nathan that the man, you remember the story where David comes and Nathan comes to David after he has taken Bathsheba as his wife and has caused Uriah to die. and he tells a story about the family that has a lamb, and the rich man comes and takes that lamb and slaughters it. And David, being a shepherd, a former shepherd, he's so angered by that. He said, the man deserves death. And then he says, well, he remembers the law, and the law says he has to pay back 4 times what he stole. Well, David would end up losing 4 sons. This young infant of David and Bathsheba, Amnon, Absalom, and Adonijah would all die, just as he had said. Tamar was the daughter of Maacah and the sister of Absalom. She was a princess, the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur, which is on the slopes of Mount Hermon. Amnon was very attracted to his half-sister and got depressed because he couldn't have her. And so his friends said, well, here's a plan. Why don't you just pretend that you're sick and have her come and cook food for you in your room, and then, you'll have her. So when David visits, he's pretending to be sick. He says, could you have my sister come and fix food for me? And in chapter 13 of 2 Samuel, starting in verse 8, it says, so Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down, and she took dough, kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and dished them out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, have everyone go out from me. So everyone went out from him. When Amnon said to Tamar, then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your hand. So Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them into the bedroom to her brother Amnon. When she brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come lie with me, my sister. But she answered him, no, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing. As for me, where could I get rid of my reproach? And as for you, you will be like one of those fools in Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. The truth is, he would have held her. That was unlawful. However, he would not listen to him, since he was stronger than she, and he violated her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her with a very great hatred, for the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, get up and go away. But she said to him, no, because this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you have done to me. Yet he would not listen to her. Then he called his young man who attended him and said, now throw this woman out of my presence, and lock the door behind her. Now she had on long-sleeved garment, for in this manner the virgin daughters of the king dressed themselves in robes. Then his attendants took her out and locked the door behind her. And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her long-sleeved garment which she was on her. And she put her hand on her head and went away crying aloud as she went. Then Absalom, her brother, said to her, has Amnon your brother been with you? But now keep silent, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this matter into heart. So Tamar remained and was desolate in her brother Absalom's house. Now when King David heard of all this matter, he was very angry. But Absalom did not speak to Amnon, neither good or bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister. There's no other word for Amnon than monster. And Shechem was bad enough, but Amnon had no conscience or compassion. He was a spoiled prince, used to getting everything he wanted. Now David was angry, but he didn't do anything about it. He didn't punish his son. Absalom pretended that he was okay with it and minimized it. So here we have Tamar, this tragic figure, a teenage girl, so beautiful, willing to help her brother, kind, and when he was sick, or she thought he was sick, and the rest of her life was ruined. Nothing was done by the king, her father, and nothing was done by her brother until, a year later when he took revenge. So she was a recluse for life, like Dinah, used and thrown away. So many sexual abuse survivors are left on their own. Nothing is done. No words of comfort and support are given. A lot of times their families try to cover it up because it would be embarrassing. Or maybe it's someone who is a part of the family and they don't want to bring a bad name on the family. No one tells them that the shamefulness is on the abuser, not them. The victim is left feeling dirty and guilty, and that should not be. So let me just wrap this up. Those stories bring home, God put those in there because these were terrible things. This is what happens in life. And let me, when people are recovering from sexual abuse, there's 4 stages that they talk about. The victim stage is when a person is still caught up in the abuse. In the book, The Body Keeps the Score, the author recounts a black belt karate expert woman who had been abused, and she had taken karate so she could take care of herself. But when she got into the situation, she just froze up and couldn't even use that. This is called learned helplessness, and that oftentimes happens when a person is there. The abuse trains them to shut down automatically. And this leads to further shame. What was the matter with me? They oftentimes ask. This is what grooming does. You've probably heard of that term, where someone trains a child to be a prostitute or whatever. Then there's a survivor stage, and that's when a person has gotten out of the abuse but may be in a bad relationship or partially shut down. They still think that it was their fault, and they think that they are not worth anything or not much. And sometimes they are abused in other ways, psychological ways. The warrior stage is the next one, and this is when the person gets angry and realizes that those things should never have happened to them. They're angry at the perpetrator, and oftentimes they're angry at God. And this is sometimes hard. They ask, where was he? Why didn't he put a stop to this? Those who are friends during this time need to let them find their own answers to this. You can't give them the answer. This is often a very difficult time for friends and family because they're learning to be assertive, and oftentimes they kind of overshoot that and become aggressive. And then there's the thriver stage, and that's when the main issues have been dealt with and put behind, and the person starts to live their life. And that's when, good friends are needed to get to that place. They have a good relationship with God. Their identity is wrapped up in who they are and not what happened to them. So some things for us to remember, hopefully in supporting them. We need to be compassionate listeners. Church members should listen more than they talk, not try to solve their problems. Acknowledge their story and their struggles. Offer a safe place and acceptance and love. Support. Survivors often feel shamed and judged, so it's so important for church members to give patient support. Patience is needed to not try to solve their problems or give them little pat answers. Let them work through the issues. Spiritual understanding. Survivors often struggle with spiritual questions and doubts, so it's important to offer sound biblical answers and not oversimplified answers or be defensive. God doesn't need us. God can take care of himself. We don't have to defend him. Some of the people that were closest to God were the ones that asked the most questions. People like Job and David and Habakkuk and Jeremiah. And the church needs to be a safe environment. And that's one of the things that I appreciate. We work on being safe. The teachers, the Bible school teachers are vetted to make sure that we have safety for that. And and be ready to act if abuse does happen, and be supportive of the people. Oldham Lane works very, very hard to be that. We want to bear one another's burdens. We want to weep with those who weep. So 2 last points. To those who have suffered abuse, I am so sorry for what you've gone through. There's no one should have hurt you like that. I hope you can find safety and love in this congregation and freedom to talk about your hurt. I hope this lesson acknowledges in a small way what you're struggling with and the importance of what you have struggled with. Now, to those who want to support those who have been abused, educate yourself. Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, and if you want these references, I'll be glad to give them to you, goes into great detail on this subject. Books on human suffering by C.S. Lewis, Philip Yancey, Peter Kreeft are really good. As a therapist, when I'm called a mandated reporter, and so if I hear of anything having to be with any kind of abuse, I'm to report it within 24 hours. But most people don't know that everyone in the state of Texas is a mandated reporter. You don't have the 24-hour limit or anything like that. But report it, and report it to CPS or Adult Protective Services. So that's the lesson. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope it hasn't been triggering to anyone. In a moment, we're going to be singing an invitation song. If you need prayers, if you desire to put Christ on in baptism, we pray that you'll come as we stand and sing.